So let me begin with a story. Have you ever heard of Jack London? Has anyone? Raise your hand if you've heard of Jack London. And what's his most famous book?
All of the Wild.
All of the Wild, thank you. So Jack London he died at the age of 40. But he became very famous and very wealthy writing fiction about what was going on in Canada, Yukon, even the South Pacific. He was out of the San Francisco area. And he was once asked, Mr. London, are there any other storytellers and stories out of the Klondike that are as good or better than yours? And Mr. London answered, yes, there are many of them. But they left them at the bar. Unlike Jack London, who, what did he do that was different? He wrote them down and became famous and wealthy. Now let's jump to another story. I had 50 years. I died in 1960. So you jump ahead 50 years, it's now 1966, and I am now a junior at MIT, and I join a group of 12, and we have an advisor. His name is J.W. Forrester. You've probably not heard of him. But he was one of the early developers of the computer. He built a computer called Whirlwind, of the digital computer, Whirlwind, and then later Sage. So at MIT, he's a god. He's still there, by the way. He's still teaching. He's still a professor, even 50 years after being my instructor in 1966. He is a piece of work, I'll tell you. But a famous inventor and a god, and I was just delighted to be part of this group of 12 advisees. And he invited us to meet with him every Friday afternoon in his office. So the 12 of us assembled on the first Friday, and he gave us an assignment, which was to write a short essay on a topic of our choice, which is really strange. We weren't expecting this from Professor Forrester, but we all went home and dutifully wrote a short essay on the subject of our choice. So we came back the next Friday, and one by one we went through all 12 essays together, with Professor Forrester correcting them and suggesting changes and so on, and that was very informative. At the end of the meeting, he said that we should go home and rewrite the same essay based on the feedback that we had received at that session. Okay, so we did that. We came back the third Friday and presented them again. We went through all 12 essays one at a time. He was reading paragraphs, correcting spelling, doing everything, and everyone joined in. And at the end of this, he said he'd like us to go home and rewrite the essay again. And just to make a long story short, we did the same essay 19 times. The same essay, over and over again, week by week. Now, I can't actually remember whether it was 19 times, but it may have only been 15 times, but it was a lot of times. I racked my brain today, I could not remember what I wrote about. I can't remember this, despite the fact I did it 15 times. It was 50 years ago, or something like that, or 40, one of those. So I don't remember that. I don't even remember what he taught me about writing, you know, like dot my I's or don't split infinitives or any of that. So I don't remember what he taught me. But what do I remember? What was the principal lesson of those 19 weeks of writing and rewriting that essay? The principal lesson was J.W. Forrester, at the time a giant, still a giant, an engineer, thinks that writing is important. And I latched right onto that in that semester and began learning to write. And that difference, that lesson, has made all the difference in the world. So by adopting that lesson, I am now also, I also received the National Medal of Technology, like Professor Forrester. I am also in the Computer History Hall of Fame, like Professor Forrester. And I did it because I learned to write. So that's why I'm trying to convince you to put some time into writing. Let me go further. First thing you learn about writing the first way you learn to write is to read. So the way to learn to write is to read. And as you read, especially if you pay attention to what works as you're reading, You're learning what you're reading, but you're paying attention to how it's being expressed and what works. So that's a good way to learn how to write, is to read, paying attention to, basically going meta. You're reading and you're looking at the writing to see what works, whether you like it or not, and how effective it is. And then you'll learn there are many forms of writing. And let me list some of them. Many forms. Tweets, Facebook posts, blog posts, PowerPoint decks, idea memos, invention records, academic papers for peer review publication, papers to be read by more than 6 people, articles to be read by millions, undergraduate theses, and I note here that theses rhymes with feces, PhD dissertations, business plans, press releases, resumes, speaking notes, to-do lists, strategy documents, meeting agenda, whiteboard notes, meeting action summaries, trip reports, specifications, requirement specifications, design specifications, data sheets, debugging logs, software documentation, and for those of you who are not doing websites, hardware documentation. I keep wondering when I'm going to annoy the shit out of Josh Baird by constantly making this dichotomy between websites and non-websites. But anyway, if you're in a non-website company,
I'm already you said annoying the shit out of it.
Op-ed pieces, commencement addresses, poetry, email rants, and love notes. Those are all writing, and they're different. So it's really a big topic we're talking about. So why write? There's 3 reasons to write. Now you knew I was going to have 3 reasons to write, especially those of you who took the course last semester, because I always have 3 reasons for doing anything. So here they are. You write to organize your thoughts. A great way to see this in action is you ever watch TV of those sitcoms? And there are those people there who are so quick and smart, they say witty things constantly, and you're sitting there thinking how stupid you are because you can't on your feet. And I want you to know those people are not thinking up what they say on their feet. That stuff has been written down carefully and organized. They have a lot of preparation that you don't have, so you shouldn't. It just looks like they're good on their feet. Actually, it's all written down. And in the course of writing it down, you get to organize it. You get to think it through, put it in the right order, make the list the right length, which is 3. You get it all laid out so that you're clear about it, because you have this opportunity, not just puffing smoke the way I am now. You're sitting down and thinking about it. So that's reason number 1. It's an opportunity to organize your thoughts. Reason number 2 is writing is persistent. That is, you come in a room and then you leave the room and it's all over. But if you write it down, it's there forever. So I wrote 400 and some columns during the 90s about the internet. And damn it, they're still out there on the internet. And the way I know this is every once in a while, one of my enemies will remind me that I said something stupid in 1996, and they'll send me a copy of the column that I wrote. Actually, the famous one was in 94, predicting the collapse of the, no, in 5, predicting the collapse of the internet, in 6, in 96.
I read on your Wikipedia.
What's that?
I read it on your Wikipedia page.
Yeah, the Wikipedia page needs editing. I keep trying to edit my Wikipedia page, and they keep undoing my editing. I think that that particular missed prediction gets much too much prominence on my Wikipedia page.
It might have been actually
What do you think?
afterwards that was
With the K.
the other case.
Yeah, so the publicity stunt which followed, that deserves some coverage. So persistence, so that your ideas stay around, hang around, that they're there. Also, it's a way of remembering. That persistence gives you a way of remembering. For example, when you write a to-do list, it helps you remember what your to-do list is. So remember persistence. And the third reason is to get your ideas out there. So here I am talking to 36 people. Well, what if I wanted to talk to 36,000 people? Would I have to give my talk 1,000 times? Well, that's not possible. So that's another thing that writing gets you. It gets you out there. So I tweet. I now have 9,244 followers. So every time I tweet some inanity, 9,200 and whatever the number, it goes up and down, by the way, they see it. And I can't possibly talk to 10,000 people in person, but they see it. And Someday I'm going to figure out why I get satisfaction in that. But I do. I announced on Twitter, by the way, that very soon I'm going to try to move from Twitter to Facebook. Because I'm getting tired of that 140 character limit. You should see the blowback on that. Because it's a religious thing. Right? There's the Twitter people, there's the Facebook people, there's the Google Plus people.
Is there?
What's that?
And there's this book, right?
It's Google's
There's at least one. Yeah, I agree with you. I would move, but I wouldn't move to Facebook. I would move to Google Plus. And he got that in 140 characters. So getting your ideas out there is the third reason. So what are the three reasons? An opportunity to organize your thoughts, persistence, and getting out there to reach more people than you possibly could physically. Does anyone have any questions? Do you all agree that writing is important yet?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I'm not going to stop just because you agree. I've written it down here, and I still have some material ahead. I thought I'd give you some examples of writing. So here I am, a grad student, which is right after this. This would be 69 or 70. And I started writing for a series of documents called RFCs. The internet was designed for a conversation called RFCs, requests for comments. And there's now, they still do it after all this time. But I wrote a double-digit one, number 89. And I wrote a triple-digit one, number 602. And they're still out there. You can Google them up, and there it is, what I wrote.
I've got 2369.
What do you have?
2369.
That's a pretty low number.
In 1998.
Where'd it go? Well, I got 602. 602 is kind of an interesting.
I've tested number 83.
So 602 is kind of interesting. Its title is something like "The stockings were hung by the chimney with care," which is a phrase you may remember. But it has to do with what I believe is the internet's first security breach. So I think I wrote the first RFC warning that the internet was vulnerable to a breach. A couple of high school students in Los Angeles broke in through UCLA and logged into a few operating systems they shouldn't have. So I wrote that memo, and of course you could see how effective it's been. This memo written in '73 completely solved the security problems of the internet. Then there was my Harvard PhD dissertation, which wasn't rejected the first time it was submitted. A very embarrassing episode. But eventually it got published. And it's pretty interesting. You can buy it today on the Amazon.com. My PhD dissertation, because it was so well written. It became a book. It's not softback yet. It's still hardback, so it's pretty expensive. But someday you should get me to tell you the story of how it got rejected. Then I wrote a memo at Xerox PARC proposing that we should have a packet. I called it a PUP. PARC, it was the research center, Palo Alto Research Center. Universal packet that could move from one network to the other. And it would be the principal vehicle in which we would organize our communications. And it was a forerunner of what's now today called IP. But by writing this memo, I got my buddies in the lab to think that it was a good thing to work on. So we implemented it. So we had a little internet, maybe, when I say little, 5,000 PCs running all over Xerox before the internet came along, based on PUP. And then when TCP/IP came along, everybody switched. But by writing that memo, I got everybody to say, hey, let's do that. So this was in a research center where everybody got to do pretty much what they wanted. So by writing this memo, I convinced them that they should join up and we should implement it together. Then I wrote another memo in 1973 describing a method for local networking computers called Ethernet. And this memo attracted the attention of a few people hanging around the lab, one notably David Boggs, and together we built the first one, and then the second one, and then the billionth one. And then the last year, I keep bragging about this, I'm sorry. Last year, 1.2 billion Ethernets were sold. If you count Wi-Fi, which I do. And then there was the first Ethernet paper, an excerpt of which I'm going to read shortly. And that paper won an award. It was one of the best papers of the first 25 years of the ACM. So it was highly regarded because, and by the way, I worked on that paper for 2 years. So imagine writing and rewriting a paper for 2 years, just like the Forrester experience. But why was I writing and rewriting it? Xerox wouldn't let me publish it because the patents hadn't been filed. So they said, you keep rewriting while we work on the patents. So I think it got to be a really good paper because of that, because we didn't ship it right away, we just kept adding it to death. And we had the world's best text editor, which we had written ourselves. You know, Microsoft Word, before that, the same guy wrote it, it's called Bravo, and then so we were using Bravo to write this and rewrite and write and rewrite and rewrite this. And then when my company started, I wrote a business plan for 3Com Corporation, which is looks like a PowerPoint presentation mostly. And then I started writing weekly updates to the employees of 3Com Corporation about what my progress had been last week and what my priorities would be next week. Does that sound familiar? You all do that? Most of you do. The 3 of you who are not writing them had better start writing them. Please. I believe that this particular management tool kept this little startup moving in the right direction. Instead of sort of confusion about what was going on, everybody knew what was happening. We put all our energy in the right direction instead of scattering. And that's why it's a requirement of this course. Because we, particularly I, think it'll do you some good to do that well. Any questions? Come on, I need a question. I need a boost, a morale boost here. Yes. I knew Dan. Dan needs no propagation. Yes, Dan. Try to make it a question.
Just writing can be time consuming. So especially when there's a lot to be done, how do you sort of balance when to write and when to work and they sometimes feed back on each other?
I do, and that's why brevity is an important tool. Brevity not only means that your communication is easier to digest because it's short, it also means you don't have to put that much time into it. But you're right, and when I wrote my column, I had 1 million readers. 1 million people would read my column in 3 or 4 days after I wrote it. And it had to be 605 words. So there I am at 3 in the morning. I have 608 words. Which 3 words am I going to delete? So it took hours to decide which 3 words to delete. But you're right, it does take time. So your principal tool for reconciling that is brevity.
Did it ever negatively impact what you had to do the next day by getting in the way?
No. The important thing is to commit yourself to write something, even if it's short. So one of the roads to hell is you imagine that it has to be this long, and that becomes an insurmountable opportunity, and you don't have time, so you write nothing. That's the wrong answer. You don't have enough time to write something short. That's the correct answer. Because even a little short thing is 100 times more valuable than nothing at all. So so your updates are intended to be a short thing. They're not intended to take hours. Right? You should be able to write an update in 15 minutes, or even a half hour if you're really enthusiastic about it. If you enjoy writing your updates, take an hour if you want. There's no limit on how much time you can take. Because once you get into this writing thing, you'll start to enjoy it. Yes?
Oh, I was just wondering, since we value brevity and the quality of the content, why is the writing assignment required to be 10 pages? I'm just saying, right?
Because 10 pages is brief. Remember when Nash was in here? Remember I argued with him. He put this slide up that says, don't waste your time writing plans, spend your time building companies, as if you were all spending all your time writing everything. See, he was solving a non-problem. You're not writing everything, I can tell. And he acknowledged that. He was quick to pick up on it. He was making a different point, but he thought everybody was spending all their time writing a business plan. A 10-page paper is not a 100-page business plan. It's my version of brief. Also, I want to get you all a writing flag from the university. And the university wants the writing assignment to be substantial. And 10 pages got me a yes. Okay? It's viewed as substantial, as opposed to an update, which is not substantial. That's half a page or like pages. You notice I did specify font size, single space, pictures. I didn't say anything about that. I would try not to go above 14 point. And try to have the margins be less than 3 inches.
Can there be pictures?
And at most one picture and a couple of flyers. Come on. Don't try to gain the system because Sam is a hard grader. He'll mark you down for those kind of shenanigans. Yes?
So a lot of most students' experiences writing up until college is not technical writing. And we take a technical writing class in college, or at least engineers do, but it only goes so far. What would you suggest, and you said the best way to learn how to write is read. So what would you suggest is the best things to read to learn more about technical writing and brevity? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is being brief and concise.
I'd like you to ask that question of Sam in a minute when he gets up. I'm going to give you a sort of a lame answer, but he'll give you a more professional answer because he knows what he's doing. In my mind, the distinctions between technical and non-technical and fiction and nonfiction are not very big. That is, I think there's a big base of just wanting to and knowing how to write and enjoying it. And then there's the variations. You wouldn't write full sentences here. You wouldn't use the passive voice in Call of the Wild. You know, there are, but those are my, in my model is those are minor variations. Sam may have a different way. Oh, my wife's a history professor. I've gone now to a bunch of her conferences. You know that those people write their speeches all the way out, which is great, and then they read them like this. And then the Battle of Tours was fought in 632, and blah, blah, blah. What is going on here? So it's a tradition in history to be boring. There are many ways to be boring. I'm trying to demonstrate another one. Now, you can learn to write, and the best way is to start writing and make it a daily habit to write something. I guess some people complain that Twitter and Facebook and so on are hurting writing, but I don't think so. The 140 character limit does tend to force people to skip verbs, articles, capitalization, and all that stuff. So that's great. But it is an opportunity to write, and to write short, be brief. So I think there's lots of writing opportunities, but you might want to go for some longer forms. You may want to go all the way out to 10 pages on occasion. That was for you. Now there's a million books on how to write, and the one I would recommend that you start with is this delightful little classic ditty called The Elements of Style by Strunk and White, and Sam and I apparently agree on that, as he's holding a copy of it. And a neat thing about the book, in addition to giving you like 100 little pointers, you can tell that those people love to write, and they're trying to share that enjoyment with you all, so it's a great book to read. But there are 1,000 of them, and they're probably all good. Yes?
How important do you think is at this stage to maintain documentation of things that the group discusses and stuff?
Documentation of what?
So when the team decides what the UI will look like or things like that, like what functions we'll have, how important do you think is to maintain a documentation of that?
Yes. It's a solid question. It has to do with, at a very early stage, which most of us are, how much writing can you do, for example, in specifying a product, the design spec, or let's say the screens. Now, those decisions are going to be made by somebody. Now, they're either going to be made by a computer programmer in the middle of the night, based on his cool idea of staying up all night. It'll be 6 in the morning by the time he gets to that decision. And so, bleary-eyed, chock full of ramen noodles, he's going to make the decision. Or you could get somebody in the daytime whose job it is to do such things, to maybe sketch it out. And And so you can affect the quality of the outcome by some prior preparation rather than just let the coders do it. In big serious companies, of course, they have documents this thick that specify the product before they even begin coding. I'm not espousing that point of view. But even a sketch, hand-drawn sketches in a few pages will go a long way to not having to redo everything.
But what about in terms of like, what?
Excuse me, let me add. You don't remember the company Lotus had a spreadsheet.
Lotus Notes.
Lotus Notes.
Before Notes,
Lotus things.
before the Notes, they had the second spreadsheet. The first spreadsheet was Visicalc. The second spreadsheet was 1, 2, 3. And the third and forever spreadsheet is Excel. And Mitch Kapoor was the founder of that company. And Mitch Kapoor did not write computer programs. He was a designer. So he designed 1, 2, 3, and his name was Jonathan Sachs, wrote it in assembly language. So Mitch didn't let John Sachs define what the features of 1, 2, 3 were going to be while he was coding it. I never saw the design document. Maybe he just sat next to him all night. Said yes, no, yes, no. Those are different talents. So some degree of design probably would be worthwhile. In big serious companies that have millions of users, it's a very formalized process. You're not allowed to code until the design spec is done. All right, so here's some advice on writing. I just thought we'd have a couple minutes to give you a few of them. I hope I'm not going to duplicate what Sam had to say. This is really easy. In a talk, tell them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them. Then tell them what you told them. But not just at the top level. In other words, your talk isn't just summary, content, summary. It iterates. So at some point, so for example, a few minutes ago, you remember I told you there were going to be 3 reasons. Before I told you the 3, I told you there were going to be 3. And now I'm telling you again there were 3. What were the 3? Does anyone remember?
Systems and then HIV.
Organization, persistence, and
HIV is on
get your ideas out there. So that's summarization in the middle of the talk. So this whole idea of summarization before and after and during recurs during the talk. This is a form of summarization here. This is what we're going to do. And we're marching through this now. Checked off. Have we thanked you enough for the pizza, Aziz?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Let's thank Aziz. I'm sure we will be able to check me off. So, tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. That should be in there somewhere. Now, I've already mentioned whiteboard writing. There is a prerequisite for whiteboard writing. You must have reasonably good penmanship, or pen personship. Indeed. How's my penmanship? Is that legible?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, where did your handwriting derive from? Like, did you take that style from anything else that you saw?
I know exactly where it came from. In 5th grade. No. In 5th grade, I was in love with Sandra Palmer. And she got an A in writing. And I got a D- from Mr. Schlinus. And I think Mr. Schlinus was sweet on Sandra Palmer. And he was jealous of me, so he dinged me with that D-. And that scarred me. So then in high school, I took drafting, mechanical drawing. And part of mechanical drawing is they teach you how to write those big letters, within straight lines and so on. So I studied that. So by the time I got to MIT, I was starting to write like this. But then I began my own variation. You'll notice that I mix up my capitals and my uppers and lowers a lot. I don't know why I do that, but everyone comments on it. Why did you choose to make, so these are all caps, but you notice those are lowercase i's. And I think that's art. I think that's, it may be art creeping in there. I don't know. I'm an So once you have some, the reason you need good penmanship is if you stand at the whiteboard and no one can read what you're writing, you're not helping at all. And so that's a play for penmanship. All right, here's another tip. Never begin a paragraph, and especially never begin the first paragraph with the word I. Always begin it with the word you. For example, I began this talk by saying, you are about to be offered one of the great secrets of success. And the reason why that's a good practice is it puts you in the right frame of mind when you're writing, is who's important in this matter. And if you start I, that's a double lose. You're coming from the wrong place, and your reader hates it. Because who's important to your reader? Not you. So that's really easy. Just start every writing that you do, everyone, not most of them, everyone, start with the word you. Sometimes I'll allow myself to say, thank you. That's a slight variation on you. Another point is, everyone needs an editor. So if you're writing for more than 10 people, you should probably have somebody else look. And the way I usually do this is I yell to the person in the next room, who's either my wife or my assistant. Say, could you come look at this, please, before I hit send? And invariably, they find something that I should fix, misspelling. Because when you look at something you've written, you can't see the mistakes because you put them there. So everyone should have an editor. Now, editors, professional writers, hate editors, but they put up with them. They argue with them. But it's good to have an editor to argue with. So you should look for editors. Have your friends look at it before you hit send. You can store things. You can store things as drafts, and then later you can send them. It took me years to learn this, but once you do that, you can get someone to look at it and find your errors and make it a little better. A little trick I use there is I will write something, and just before I bring my editor in, I will change the font size. I will change the font. So I'll go from Times Roman to Helvetica. I'll go from 12 to 18. And then I'll go through it again. And the change of size causes errors to jump out. And then you have your editor come in and fix the other stuff you haven't done. So let me close with two examples. One is by Jack London and one is by me. I like being on that list. And this is from Call of the Wild. By the way, Call of the Wild is about a dog. What's his name? Buck. And ironically, Buck starts his life in the Santa Clara Valley. Do you know what they call the Santa Clara Valley today? Silicon Valley. So isn't it funny that this dog starts in Silicon Valley and ends up in the Klondike? All that stirring of old instincts, which at stated periods drives men out from the sounding cities to forest and plain, to kill things by chemically propelled leaden pellets. The bloodlust, the joy to kill, all this was Buck's, only it was infinitely more intimate. He was ranging at the head of the pack, running the wild thing down, the living meat, to kill with his own teeth and wash his muzzle to the eyes in warm blood. My wife told me I shouldn't read this to you. It's pretty gruesome. That's great writing. Actually, the whole book is great writing. It's very hard to choose a paragraph. But it just gets you going. Here's something I wrote in 1976. Actually, for the 2 years ending in 1976. Ethernet is a branching broadcast communication system for carrying digital data packets among locally distributed computing stations. The packet transport mechanism provided by Ethernet has been used to build systems which can be viewed either local computer networks or loosely coupled multiprocessors. On Ethernet's shared communication facility, its ether, is a passive broadcast medium with no central control. Coordination of access to the ether for packet broadcasts is distributed among the contending transmitting stations using controlled statistical arbitration. Switching of packets to their destinations on the ether is distributed among the receiving stations using packet address recognition. Design principles and implementation are described based on experience with an operating Ethernet of 100 nodes along a kilometer of coaxial cable. A model for estimating performance under heavy loads and a packet protocol for error-controlled communication are included for completeness. That was the best I could do after 2 years of writing. That's the abstract. Wash his muzzle to the eyes in warm blood. Completely different stuff. Okay, so in summary, writing is important. It can make a huge difference in prospects for you and your company. Get writing right away. You can learn to write. You can make it a habit. You can even get good at it just through practice. You need to practice. Just write all the time. Listen, when you meet somebody who's writing a book, and they start telling you about the book they're writing, while they're doing that, they're not writing their book. Real writers write. And those of us who are not writing, we tell you about the book that we're writing. We're not really writing it.